Welcome to Drawing Lab number 17. Today we're going to talk about tracing. You might think tracing is bad. It's not real art and we're not allowed to trace ever. And if it's just the tracing and you trace exactly what you see and don't do anything else on your own that's creative, then that's not really the best art. But you can also learn a lot about other people's art by tracing them. And that could be the starting point of your art project where you add your own original things to it. I have this rice paper here. It makes it a little bit easier to see the image underneath. You could also use tracing paper if you have it, or you could even use regular paper as long as it's thin enough and also as long as the image that you're tracing is nice and dark and has lots of contrast. So if you decide to explore tracing, you're going to set your paper on top and make sure you get all the wrinkles out. And then only trace the really big parts of your project. Don't trace the details because that is where you'll want to add your original ideas. You can sometimes peek, and maybe I will trace that stem shape. And then the rest I'm going to do on my own. So the tracing should be only used in the very beginning of the project. I'm going to set this aside, but I'm going to look at it once in a while. So now I'm going to add things to this tracing. Right now I'm making artwork inspired by this artist. Her name is Yayoi Kusama, a contemporary artist from Japan. She likes to do lots of pumpkins. So I'm making artwork inspired by her work. So maybe instead of adding polka dots, like Yayoi Kusama does, maybe I will add some different kinds of patterns. Maybe I will add some lines to show the volume of the pumpkin. But then instead of adding these polka dots, what if I did some stripes? And now it's starting to look a little bit different, even though the starting point was exactly the same. Maybe I will try adding some stripes to the stem as well. And this is a sculpture, so you can kind of see the wall or the edge of the table that's sitting on. But maybe I'll do something totally different for the background in mind. Maybe I'll do some polka dots in the background, adding more inspiration from the artist that I'm being inspired by, but doing it in a very different way, doing it in my original way. Remember that patterns are things that repeat. If you repeat circles, they turn into a polka dot pattern. So now I have my image inspired by this piece of artwork, but traced and done in my own way. When I'm finished, I'm going to start to trace. I'm a fan of using two different thicknesses when we trace. And tracing is also called inking, and I have a separate video of that goes into a little bit more detail. But one way to use those two different line weights is to draw the contour, that's the outline, the basic shape of your project, with a thicker line. Maybe I'll add this one as a thicker line too. And how about right here, that's the top of the stem and the different sides of the pumpkin. But then when I go into the detail, I'm going to switch to a skinnier one. If you don't have a thick Sharpie and a skinny Sharpie, one thing you could try is using a thicker marker and a ballpoint pen. A black ballpoint pen works pretty well as a skinny tracing tool. So I finished tracing my pumpkin, and then now I think I'm going to stick to the skinny Sharpie for the background. That is one way to make sure the positive space of your project, that's the actual object that you drew, is going to stand out. If you make your background lines as thick as the foreground lines, sometimes your positive space is going to blend in to the whole picture and it'll be hard to see. This is one way to create focal point. That's things that stand out, the main part, the most important part of the artwork. Here's my finished traced image, and I will show you how I'm going to color this in another video.